Yeah, I think that's actually just a louder clip than everything else too, though. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
I turned you up, so
that's good.
Anybody else need anything in their mix?
We need to start.
That was not the question that was asked. Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on news, politics, and culture, where it is always our mission to arm you with the tools you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. I'm here with my esteemed co-hosts, David Rand and Kyle Mack. David, what are we talking about today?
Well, the first most important story of the century happened today.
What is that?
Which is the Human Reaction podcast has started a Substack, and you got to come on to our Substack and sign up, help us support the podcast so that we can keep the lights on, keep Joe, obviously this building here with all this great stuff that we're doing, building up podcasting and Bozeman, everything else.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we can get someday pay Bennett for all of his hard work, actually doing the real work while we just talk like idiots. And so for the real stories this week, beyond that one, the stories that aren't relevant to the podcast is X has signaled that we have the death of acronyms in America. Acronyms are going out. Goodbye CIA, FBI, and DEI, and NHS, and what else? All the acronyms are dying.
Every three letters.
Whatever
combination exists between those three letters, they're gone.
They're gone. We're getting rid of them.
Can't use them.
Abolishing them all, especially when Vivek is the new president. Masks are returning to blue America. That's also a big news story this week. Yep. Bennett's hometown.
Bennett fled that, so.
is masking up. And then lastly, we have stories of the migrant crisis, and busing controversy reaches new levels as record levels of migrants came in December and already in January.
Yes, and while you're here, like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube, the Rumble, the Spotify things, wherever you're listening to us. And also, we're going to be covering a bunch of stories here, so just jump to the chapter marks of whatever you're the most interested in. And we are continuously climbing. A lot of our more recent episodes have been doing very well, so we're very happy to see that. So
absolutely,
just subscribe to us. We want to keep bringing you content.
And thank you for watching. We do appreciate it. So, the death of DEI. What does this mean? What's going on?
So I think the biggest thing in the news, and I think something that represents this, is the whole Harvard president's plagiarism scandal here. You have a lot of news outlets like the Associated Press saying that this resignation highlights this conservative weapon that is being used to hit people like the Harvard president with allegations of plagiarism. Now, the fun thing about Elon Musk's new X is this little feature called Community Notes, where the community can weigh in on the subject and try to fact check these articles in real time, where you have saying, well, it's not just a conservative weapon, like she actually just breached and violated with plagiarism, right? And AI discovered this. Claudine Gay was ultimately forced to resign for a series of breaches of their policy. So they're trying to lace it with all the fancy magical words about like racism and discrimination and all these things, right? But I think what this really signals right now is these acronyms, DEI, ESGs, whatever we want to call all of these systems, these like frameworks for social credit that we have right now, they're all falling apart. Everybody's kind of like becoming over them. It's stopped being this thing that people care about anymore, and everybody kind of sees through the BS that is now laden within them. So what do you guys feel about this all?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's an application of large language models to look through all of her academic history and then discover all the plagiarism. Very interesting phenomenon. We kind of talked about it in the last episode before this one about what it meant, large language models in 2023. This lady came out, became kind of in the public eye because of freedom of speech and on public campuses versus keeping
like student groups
Jewish students safe and things like that, because the Republicans are very much concerned about the safety of Jewish students on campus with the rise of what they feel like is anti-Semitism on campus. And, obviously there is a political motive here. Right. A lot of this focus on her came about because of a political situation that Congress set up. But on the other hand, the application of the plagiarism rules here are not done because as she's framed it. And if you look at like Morning Rising, that's a pretty good YouTube show. It does a lot of good news coverage. Rob Suave and I forget her last name, Bree. I can't remember her last name right now. she does the best job that I've seen trying to defend this woman. And it's like this idea that, well, this is only good if it's generally applied, right? If we do all the academics, if we bend large language models against every academic, then it's like as showing that this is a tool for, holding the powerful and elite accountable.
Well, yeah, let's do it.
But right now it's only being used on against someone's the right doesn't like. So that's kind of what the Associated Press is going for here is like this person, the right doesn't like them right now. And they're being prosecuted because of this. When, honestly, she just didn't get caught saying something the right doesn't like. She got caught plagiarizing. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think doesn't it call into question the validity of, a lot of the credentials that these higher level academics are using to establish their intellectual authority?
And so what they're saying is their argument is like, why are you using it on a black woman when you can use it against anybody? It's like, well, that doesn't mean it can't be used against anybody, but she happens to be in the news.
Which for a decade has been like a very effective tool for just kind of like softening these types of blows, right? But now everybody's just like, we're over it, man.
Yeah.
We're so done. Like this DEI stuff is just not working.
Like, look, it doesn't matter what color her skin is. She plagiarized a bunch of stuff. And it wasn't even just like they're pulling some little thing out of context. Wasn't it like vast swaths of her thesis?
And 50 different accusations of plagiarism.
Wow.
Not just one, not three, 50. So it's completely, I mean, the case is so systematic and so huge. Now, the question is, how did she get to this place without anyone catching it? What are the failures of the traditional system that this represents? That's an interesting dialogue we haven't had yet. Part of the underlying question is, was she a diversity hire? That's what's kind of lingering in the background that they're kind of trying to tease at, that she's trying to say like, oh, well, you always believe I was just a diversity hire. Well, you weren't a good academic because you plagiarized. Like that's the definition of a bad academic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If there is one.
So that's the question.
Well, and I think that X, just where all the best conversations are being had, Mark Cuban weighed in on the DEI ideas right now. And actually, before we kind of dig into this, I whipped up just like a quick little meme template that I think represents how this conversation has existed for a decade. And it shows like where Mark Cuban is versus where broader public is starting to become. It's the classic old mid-curve meme here where you have, if you're just listening on audio, I'll kind of explain it, but it's the concept of like the bell curve where you have like most people are existing inside the middle, and the people that are the low IQ and the high IQ, they have the exact same opinion that DEI is just another word for racism. And then you have the guy in the middle that is like, and I'm using Mark Cuban symbolically here, where he then decides to go into a long diatribe explaining things and just completely missing like the forest for the trees, where he's just like, well, the reason why you want diversity in your corporate hires is X. The reason why you want, and he just goes through all the stuff without understanding how this is being used as a tool for a weapon. And then you have a bunch of other kind of corporate people like Elon Musk or Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman is one of the most surprising people on this in recent months, I would say, because he's kind of like this lefty activist guy, a billionaire type. But you have them just being like, bro, we used to believe that too. We used to believe you too, Mark. But
we're seeing through it now.
We looked into it a little bit. Yeah. Like we just did a little bit of digging and we're like, oh, this is being used as a weapon. Mm-hmm. All right.
And so Mark Cuban is invoked here because in response to something that Elon Musk tweeted, and you want to go through this, Kyle?
Yeah. So Elon tweeted out that discrimination on the actually, it might be best to go back to he was responding to Ed Krasenstein, which is this kind of like left-wing, him and his brother are these left-wing Twitter journalists, and they've gotten a lot of attention over recent years. Like they're kind of on all the major Twitter spaces, all this X spaces, where he is kind of saying like, I don't think DEI is racism, but it definitely can have some major flaws that should be addressed. I believe we should focus more on addressing socioeconomic differences rather than racial differences, addressing socioeconomic differences and trying to level the playing field, and it goes on. But I think you can kind of understand where he's going with this. And then Elon Musk tweets, discrimination on the basis of race, which DEI does, is literally the definition of racism. And that's what sparked Mark Cuban to go into this large 22 million views, right? This large explaining let me help you out and give you my thoughts on DEI, where he goes
Help you out?
Yeah. Let me help you out.
Condescending bullshit.
Let me help you out. Where he goes into
Elon.
like a whole thing like, 1, why we need diversity, 2, why we need equity, and he goes through.
What's his case for equity?
His case for equity is treating people equally does not mean treating them the same. I made the mistake for a lot of years thinking it did. Equity is a core principle of business, but your employees in a position to put your employees in a position to succeed, recognize their differences and play to their strengths where, sorry, I just expanded it and I lost it. Strengths wherever possible. It is not a hard concept, but is not easy to implement. Most workforces don't have the depth of management to do this well. When it's not done well, it can create tension and resentment. See, like that's a reasonable thing to say, right? But
Other than that,
you're missing the forest for the trees. Like you're not understanding. Like yes, should you kind of have like should you try to like treat everybody in your company the same? Like should you do that? It's like it's probably a valuable principle to have.
Other than that's not what equity is. That's the thing that ticks me off here is he's using equality to describe equity.
Yeah, he's totally confusing those two words.
Yeah, and all jargon words.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing that bothers me is that he can't even defend it on its terms. He has to bring in and redefine it to make it palatable because no one likes equity when you define it. If you define equity as making sure that everyone has the same result, as opposed to equality, which is making sure everyone's treated the same.
Right.
These are very simple terms, very simple jargon. That when we brought in equity, there's a bunch of people trying to blur the lines here. And what he means here is a very specific interpretation to benefit himself, to make it framed so that he can keep his lefty feelings together, as opposed to being honest. So one of the things I don't like, and one of the things I love how Elon calls him out about this, is because he's obviously being manipulative. He's obviously trying to say, this isn't what it looks like. It's actually great. But in order to do that, he has to redefine it in a way that it isn't defined on its own terms. Because if you actually look at DEI, it doesn't define equity as equality. It defines equity as equity.
Equity as in outcome is the same.
Yes.
Just Mark is tweeting right now as we're going into it. But he's responding to a recent tweet that Elon made, which is cool. So when should we expect to see short white Asian women on the Mavericks?
Which, for those who don't know, Mark Cuban is an owner of the
Mavericks.
So why do only some people play for the best teams, right? And should you run your business in the interest of social justice? Now, the initial tweet that prompted this is specifically defending equity as creating a net result that's good for social justice. That's the initial tweet. So Mark Tuigan's going like, oh no, initial tweet guy who's talking about this. It actually means equality. And then he's being called out on what we actually mean by equity. Because equality means we have a standard, are you good at basketball? And we treat everyone the same. And if you're a short Asian guy and you're good at basketball, you can make it onto the Mavs. Equity says you will hire the short Asian guy in order to create social justice. Right. Equal outcome.
Right.
And it doesn't become more clear than that, right?
Well, no, specifically the short Asian girl.
Short Asian woman, yeah, exactly.
Into the men's basketball league, right?
Well, and it's classic hypocrisy because obviously it's a mismatch of what he preaches and what he practices, right? Of course, he would never do that ever in a million years because that would be terrible for his team. It might be like a novelty for one game to watch the Mavs get destroyed.
Well, and as Thomas Sowell,
this might be an ESG play.
That's fair.
You got to bump your social credit.
But as Thomas Sowell pointed out, it actually isn't good for the people who are participants in it. For example, DEI, equity as applied to college admissions, underserves the students who get wrapped up into those situations.
Yeah.
When you're a student who is unqualified to go to Harvard and you would probably do better in your academic field of picking up skills and learning key things at a state institution or another institution that maybe isn't Harvard, when you go to Harvard, you have a higher chance of dropping out than if you didn't.
Yeah.
And so that it actually uses those people as tokens, as tools. It turns them into a type, an archetype, a symbol for the virtue of equity rather than what they actually are, which are human beings who have ends and goals and means they're trying to accomplish. And you boil their humanity out of them and turn them into a symbol for your virtue.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be good for the Asian woman who goes into the basketball league, to the Mavs, is the point.
Correct.
Right? Because at that point, you're a token.
Yep. The way Thomas Sowell puts it in that context of students at Harvard is there's someone to feel sorry for.
Right.
Right.
Well,
the
remember we
institution.
had the whole Supreme Court situation with the Asian stuff with
Admissions.
Yeah, and that was Harvard too, specifically, wasn't that targeted Harvard?
Right.
Was because they have too many Asians. So like that was like the diversity thing. So like Asians were getting, they were kind of getting. Like what would you call it? They're kind of getting shafted in a sense for because they were doing too well. So they had to bring that number down and bring other minority groups up in order to fill it.
As I recall, it was that, Asian students got on average higher test scores than white or minority students, other minority students, to get into Harvard. So they were actually, they were being leveraged against. Basically, they had a higher standard to get into Harvard than everyone else did, which is very wrong, obviously.
Yeah, which is like these are the unintended consequences of all of these types of policies that exist here. Where like they're trying to go for some sort of high value that they want to achieve, which is diversity and egalitarianism. Like everything's nested in that framework, and then what you end up having is like. And they're trying to do it in the name of fairness, right? And things become very unfair because they no longer become meritocratic. It's just like, we have to fill a number. You're just like a check mark that we have to hit, right?
You're not a person, you're a statistic. You're a type. And so in order to create social justice, we have to boil the humanity out of you and make sure we have equal outcome. Now they tried to do this game on, and we actually had this explanation, which I really like too, which is, obviously the midwit to the person who, is actually dealing with the facts of DEI.
Well, so Bill Ackman, he said, Mark, that's exactly what I thought until I did the work. I encourage you to do the same and revert. DEI is not about diversity, equity, or inclusion. Trust me, I felt the same. I fell into the same trap you did, Bill. And Bill Ackman, he's an American hedge fund billionaire who's been funding like left-wing stuff for a very long time. Like he's kind of considered like this activist hedge fund manager. And it's been interesting to watch because I'm noticing just a lot of these types over the last year are starting to move in this direction where like for years, for like a decade, they've all been on board doing the same Mark Cuban kind of midwittery, right? As was kind of showcased by my excellent meme, right? But now we're watching all these people, and simply, I think the Bill Ackman thing is just like follow the money. It's not working anymore. Like this doesn't actually help my investments in any. Like they want to do the good thing. They want to be the kind, compassionate people, but they're realizing the kind compassion that they're trying to portray doesn't actually make the businesses better in any meaningful way. And he is a hedge fund manager that wants to have returns on his investments, right?
Well, and like David made the point, nor does it make the people better, right? Like if you go to Harvard but you drop out, or you could go to a state school and excel, well, you would obviously prefer to do that one, right? So yeah, huge mismatch here. And they tried to drag Vivek into this too, didn't they? Recently.
I think that this is kind of like a side, like it's a thing that's existing on the periphery of this, but like it all falls under the same umbrella of what we're talking about.
Well, they use white nationalism as like the thing that beats you over the head as the boogeyman so that you will embrace DEI or embrace the kind of outlook. It's the lefty, thing under the bed to keep you like, oh man, we really need to solve this problem so that we can have a racially just future.
Well, remind me of the beginning of this before we get into it, because I don't have like the beginning of this here queued up. Like, this was all because of someone in Iowa that endorsed
Steve King.
Who endorsed Vivek, and now this reporter, this journalist here, is like, you need to condemn white supremacy. Like, is doing that whole thing, that whole shtick, right?
Right, and Steve King did say racially insensitive things, but I don't think there were things. And it's been some time, so I might be talking out of turn. But I don't remember Steve King's comments being as such that he was like endorsing white nationalism, right? I remember it being racially insensitive and kind of a cliche boomer sort of thing to say, but not a, he's not that guy in Whitefish. What's that cat's name?
Richard Spencer.
With the comb over. Yeah, Richard Spencer. He's not Richard Spencer, and he's defending Richard Spencer. He's defending a U.S. representative that endorsed him. And he's saying like, look, he endorsed me. That doesn't mean obviously, and if I could defend Vivek for a second, someone endorsing you doesn't mean you endorse them. Duh. Like, it takes an incredible amount of midwittery to be like, well, do you accept their endorsement? Well, it's like,
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Can I just like deny and endorse? Well, but remember, this is the same stuff that happened with Trump. Like, remember, there's all these people that endorsed him, and then the media would be like, "Do you denounce? Do you denounce?" He's like, "Yeah, I denounce white supremacy," and then he moves on with it. And then they'd be like, "He refused to denounce white supremacy." And you can see like there's been compilations because of this showing the Trump situation where it'd be like 3-minute clip, like a 3-minute clip of a compilation of like every 5 seconds, just Trump being like, "Yes, I denounce white supremacy. Yes, I denounce white supremacy," and just going on and on with different situations. And then reporters continually being like, "He refuses to do it." Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
So this is the after tweet of the conversation. It's good to start at the end here. I think it's actually a clever way to tell the story because this is what she tweeted about the conversation. I asked Vivek if he condemned white supremacy. Vivek said to, quote, "Stop picking on this farce of some figment that exists at some infinitesimally small fringe," end quote. He said he condemns, quote, "vicious racial discrimination," end quote, but would not, quote, "bend the knee," end quote, and condemn white supremacy. That's her framing of how this conversation went. Now we can actually watch the conversation.
And again,
Community Notes
is on it. And they even show the video of, they show the videos here. But here is an example of him condemning white supremacy or whatever.
Or refusing to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to recite some catechism for you. I'm against vicious racial discrimination in this country. So I'm not pledging allegiance to your new religion of modern wokeism, which actually fits the test. I'm not going to bend the knee to your religion. I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to bend the knee to mine, and I'm not going to bend the knee to yours. But do I condemn vicious racial discrimination? Yes, I do. Am I going to play your silly game of gotcha? No, I'm not. And frankly, this is why people have lost trust. And I know you're going to go print the headline tomorrow. I already know this. We already know how your game works. Vivek Ramaswamy refuses to condemn white supremacy because you asked a stupid question. The reality is, I condemn vicious racial discrimination in this country, but the kind of vicious and systematic racial discrimination we see today is discrimination on the basis of race in a very different direction. You want to know what the best way is to end discrimination on the basis of race? Stop discriminating on the basis of race. Do that, and we're going to move this country forward. And I don't care whether you're black or white or brown or anything in between. That's how we're going to unite this country. You people have been responsible for dividing this country to a breaking point, creating a projection of national division. I meet people from the south side of Chicago to meetings like this one of every shade of melanin, multiple, from man to woman, doesn't make a difference, who are hungry for reviving unity in this country. And you, with your catechism that you try to get to politicians to whatever fake headline you're going to print on the basis of this conversation tomorrow, that's what's dividing this country to a breaking point. Shame on you. Look people in the eye and tell them what you've actually failed to tell them for the last 5 years. Own the accountability for your own failures as the media. That's how we rebuild trust in this country. And until then, I don't have a lot of patience to play the games.
Woo!
Damn.
Fire!
God, I love that man.
I am going to get you some merch. Oh, yep.
We need we need a Vivek prompt on your soundboard. There's got to be something that we could grab from.
I'm not going to bend my knee to your religion.
Yeah.
That was so good. I mean, like, especially because what he's talking about is, obviously that wasn't the full conversation, but there's a debate before this that she's mentioning where it's very specifically about what do we mean by white supremacy? Like, what are we talking about? She is like this impression that there's all these white supremacists out there hiding someplace trying to start about like a white nationalist revolution. It's like a Red Scare, right? It's a white nationalist scare that's kind of always pervasive and always under the bed, like there to leap out and to freak out liberals. It's not a thing, right? It's not a pervasive, large-scale thing. In fact, you have $1 trillion of DEI funding actually changing the landscape of America. Trillions of dollars of funding. You have programs that have systematically discriminated against Asians at Harvard. Real programs that said, we're going to, whatever it is of people who meritocratically would get here, we're going to reduce that because they're Asian. That's the point that he's pointing to. He's saying that is real racial discrimination. We should go for inequality of opportunity. We say the rules apply the same to everybody, and we're not going to racially discriminate in any way to sort social justice. That itself is an excellent defense of the conservative case that they've been making for decades, but Vivek is able to make it on a new level with a better articulation. So I really appreciate it. It's awesome.
Well, and the beautiful thing about this too, the sweet irony, is that headline was in fact printed the next day, was it not?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's the tweet that she just sent out afterwards.
Yeah.
Which obviously, this is why X is such a huge part of it, is the community notes check, and then additionally it kind of exposes how the game works because you have the video function.
I love it. If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thuen at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success. From grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management. Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL Patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's ZESTYBEV.com.
All right. So is that it for DEI?
Yeah, I think let's
exercise
move on.
that demon?
Yeah.
All right. I don't have a lot more time, guys. So masks return to some localities across America. Do you want to jump up that CBS
yes, let me pull it.
video, my friend?
So this comes right on the heels of us saying, I think we mentioned on the year-end review show that this claim that we had talked about around the fall, what people were calling for, the return of COVID, hadn't really come true. Well, and then now we're actually starting to see some signs of it maybe creeping back in.
Yes and no. So let's dig into it. You can see the video and we can do that.
Here, new concerns about a spike in COVID cases.
Our volume has really surged. And I attribute that to not just COVID, but influenza, RSV. I'm not seeing as many people fully immunized as in past years for flu, for COVID boosters. And so it makes them much more vulnerable.
The rise in infections has prompted at least 5 states to reinstate masking requirements at healthcare facilities as a new variant spreads across the country. Cases are up at least 25% in Los Angeles County, where emergency room physician Dr. Angelique Campen says she's happy to see the mask mandate return.
It really helps to protect the vulnerable people that are sitting out there in the waiting room right now.
The CDC says the new COVID vaccine is the best tool to stay protected against serious illness, but vaccination rates are at an all-time low. Less than 20% of adults have received the updated vaccine. And tonight, there's also a growing number of flu and RSV cases, with 31 states seeing high or very high levels of respiratory infections, leading to worries that a triple virus threat could strain hospitals.
Are you concerned that these numbers will continue to get worse?
We're not at the peak yet this winter. I'm still seeing numbers increase. Right now, it seems like every other patient I'm seeing in the emergency department is one of these viruses.
Here in California, the first child flu death was recently announced. Doctors say it's not too late to get vaccinated for both the flu and COVID to help protect your family.
This reporting brought to you by Pfizer. So the interesting, right? So this isn't a California-wide or Illinois or Massachusetts, sorry, Bennett, wide mask mandate. This is localities for the most part, mostly counties, saying in hospitals you have to wear a mask. Now let me ask you something. Why can't hospitals require a mask at hospitals? Why does it have to be the county that does that? Because we've politicized hospitals, right? Yeah. We've undermined their ability. We've required them to admit everybody. So they can't do that without that question. They have to have the government there because we've said they have to admit everybody. So that means they have to admit people who refuse to wear a mask unless you put in a mask mandate. It's a contradiction in the law because we've diverted away from property rights. If we had a simple property regime where these hospitals were not quasi-government institutions, but rather private institutions that could design their own policies, then they could put together their mask mandate. In fact, it makes no sense why we didn't have mask mandates in hospitals all the time if they're effective and the science backs that up and the hospitals think they should. But we've made it all political. We've made it not a question of what is best for patients. We've made it into a giant political game because we've diverted away from the basis of freedom.
Well, yeah,
which is property rights.
expanding on that idea, because like that would be a clear price signal for what makes a hospital good is like certain elements of like are diseases transmitting between like different patients and stuff like that. Like those would be clear indicators that if you were like a completely private institution, you'd be using that as like your advertising thing. It's like, you know, you're safe with us, not like that other hospital, right? Like,
right.
But now everything's just entirely politicized, which expands beyond just the medical stuff. Like it expands into every aspect of life, really, because everything's become so politicized everywhere.
And that's really the vision for the future, right? The vision for the future is one where we can actually debate the science of things rather than have to go into a religion of masks being good. Watch the performativeness here, where they're in the hospital talking to a woman about epidemiology when she's not an epidemiologist, she's a doctor. Right? They're talking about macrophone. It's a halo effect. This is a psychological effect where you talk to someone who's an expert and you put a halo around them psychologically, and then you say they're an expert about everything.
It's the whole trust the science thing, right?
Right. And then you have her do the performative act where it's in the hospital rather than someplace that would be safe to conduct an interview. It's in the hospital hallway. Number two, she's wearing a mask during the thing as performative, as like, well, look, it's not weird to wear a mask. We saw this during COVID. We're trying to unlace the symbolism
symbology
of the situation. I was just waiting for you. Yeah, you are our soundboard when Joe's not on it.
I don't have that clip. So.
That's going on.
I sent it to you.
We're trying to kind of tear apart this is propaganda, not in the sense that you're thinking. Like it is trying to inform. I'm sure the people who are involved is trying to inform, but the way they layer this is specifically trying to create the result of make sure to mask up. Why isn't your locality imposing masks in their hospital? What is your, have you gotten the flu? One kid died of the flu. All years, one kid dies of the flu, at least. Did that kid have comorbidities? We don't know anything about it. We don't know anything important to actually make it a designation where that's valuable for you, but we're going to make sure to end with that promotion that's a religious one in nature that says that vaccines are good because we're going to signal that our tribe likes vaccines. That's the point of what we just watched. So I thought it was like a great case study.
The religious parallels are very clear, and you see that just in every form of government. It's not just this area. Like it's like the people wearing the fancy suits inside of the fancy buildings. They're the ones showcasing to you. Like we saw that with the mask stuff. It'll be Biden will have the mask giving a speech, and then as soon as the speech is done, he walks off and takes off the mask. Right? Like it's all about like how are you portraying it on camera where everyone is seeing. It does not matter what happens post that, right?
Yeah.
Similar to that, we have kind of the hidden phenomena of the border crisis, right? CBS News has this report that I thought it'd be fun to react to as well, Kyle.
Yes. Let me pull
This is about migrants being flown from Texas to other cities and counties around America, bused or flown.
We're actually just a CBS reaction channel now.
Well, I just thought they did the most funny things.
ABC.
Oh, this is ABC. Sorry.
Yeah, you accused Amy Robach of being
CBS too.
CBS
I don't know why.
What is that?
I'm on an anti-CBS train.
Your acronyms are all off.
It's the death of acronyms.
To the breaking point. Overnight, Texas Governor Greg Abbott ordered planes to drop off 350 migrants at an airport near Chicago. The move is escalating tensions between Abbott and the mayors of several major cities. Here's ABC's Irene Shaw.
Tonight, amid the record number of migrant crossings along the southern border, 3 U.S. mayors sounding the alarm, saying their cities are at a breaking point. Just today, Texas Governor Greg Abbott ordering a Boeing 77 plane carrying 350 asylum seekers to arrive in Rockford, Illinois. The passengers immediately bused to Chicago. Abbott, who for months has been busing migrants to so-called sanctuary cities, starting the flights after Chicago officials began impounding the buses used to transport them. Similar scenes in Denver and New York City, where more unannounced buses arrived. Since August of last year, Abbott has sent nearly 30,000 migrants to New York City alone, prompting the 3 mayors to require bus companies to give advance notice and additional restrictions for dropping passengers off with stiff penalties, saying the current system is harmful.
It puts those who have already suffered so much in danger. To be clear, this is not stopping people from coming, but about ensuring the safety of migrants and making sure they can arrive in a coordinated and orderly way.
Those mayors demanding federal support to help manage the increasing numbers of migrants.
We cannot continue to do the federal government's job.
Biden dispatching Secretary Blinken to Mexico to meet with Mexico's president this past week, encouraging them to step up immigrants' enforcement, reopen key ports of entry, and encourage migrants to stay in Mexico. But Mexico's president pushing for more aid. And Congress is stalling on a vote on border policy changes. The bill is tied to a package that includes funding for Ukraine and Israel. Meanwhile, nearly 250,000 migrants crossed the U.S. border in just December. Lindsay?
And that is false at the end there. It's the other way around. Congress is holding up Ukraine funding in order to try to get the Biden administration to do something about the border. She reversed it. And that ticks me off watching that. It's so frustrating because you would get the impression that they're just being jerks, like refusing to do something about the border because there's Ukraine funding in it. It's the opposite of that.
Yeah. They're using the Ukraine funding as leverage
to try to get the Biden administration to do something other than undermine Texas trying to enforce its own border.
Well, right. So the weird contradiction I saw there was that the Biden administration dispatches Secretary of State Anthony Blinken to Mexico to talk about things we can do and put pressure on Mexico to ramp up enforcement.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Texas is trying to enforce its border, but the federal government is like suing them and interrupting their ability to enforce their own border. Is that right?
Yes. And additionally, removing actual border protections. And it's something we reported on before. We actually got the video of the machine taking down the fence.
Yeah.
Right. And this was a federal government agency taking down the fence to prevent this happening in the effort to, I don't know. I can't give you a reason that's not the Great Replacement theory, right? That's not, and I don't mean that from a racial point of view. We've talked about this before, but what I mean is the strategic point of view, the idea that you boil out votes by bringing in more people who might vote Democrat if you position yourself as their ally.
Yeah.
Right, which is something that Biden himself has been quoted saying, Van Jones himself has been quoted saying, other people on the left have celebrated this idea and said that this is our strategy for how we maintain power. So I'm just using their own words here, that this is one thing that they want. Why does the Biden administration refuse to enforce the border? Why?
Well, there's an added thing too, because a story that we weren't able to cover over the holidays because we were gone for the holidays. It all happened kind of like right after we took our break. Was this story that Ashley St. Clair broke on X about these undocumented immigrants being given passage on planes, and all these big airline pilots coming forward kind of anonymously saying that this was happening. And it's like, who's doing this? Like, what is like, what are the details here? What's going on? Like, there seems to be a bigger play that it does exist. And it's like, is it just simply Great Replacement theory stuff? Well, like what is going on?
Is it a political motive? Is it if the Biden administration came out and said, hey, we don't have facilities in Texas to be able to manage this, and we need to spread out the impact and for economic reasons, for taxpayer security reasons? Sure. Other than the fact that, how many people actually show up for their asylum hearing? A lot do. Most do, in fact, according to the data, but not all do. And so if you spread that out, what is the impact of that? What if we actually enforce the border? What if we had the federal government not stop Texas from enforcing the border?
Well,
right. I mean, like, those are like obvious steps there, but the Biden administration is such a bad faith actor here, where they're obviously talking out both sides of their mouth. And then additionally, that uninterested, obviously, by their own policies of enforcing it.
So after the Ashley St. Clair story broke, James O'Keefe, so her and James O'Keefe, and I think Elon was a part of this, had a X Spaces where they were kind of going on, and they brought like anonymous pilots on, and there's a feature on X Spaces now where you can use voice changers. So they actually had like voice changers with the pilots. So kind of cool what Elon's doing for citizen journalism, essentially. So you can have legit anonymous people come on with like burner accounts and report. But James was saying that he went and investigated in Phoenix what was going on, and he had the front people at the gate agents. That's the word I'm looking for. The gate agents were like coming. It was like, you're James O'Keefe. You have to do something about this. Like, and they would just like spill the beans on everything that they've seen about these, about people coming in with no IDs, and which is like, you think about TSA and it's like, you need IDs to go on planes. That's like kind of the whole TSA.
Totally.
Unless you're that person. Yeah.
It went both ways actually. So for James O'Keefe, exactly. He had people pulling him aside who knew who he was, who were like, we can't be seen talking to you, but this is so important. We're like, we need somebody to say something about this, because this is happening. We have people coming on who are literally using arrest warrants from the border as their identification, going through without any, TSA, approval, boarding pass, whatever, just getting put on these planes to wherever. And there's a huge risk here, and they highlighted this of human trafficking. These people are being sponsored by someone to fly to some destination, but it's very opaque as to who that is and what their motives are, and what that person, and some of these people are kids, what they're going to be doing, or who they're going to be with on the other side of this trip. And then on the flip side of that, I believe it was Ashley St. Clair who said that when she raised the question to a gate agent, like, are these migrant individuals? Because she saw them all carrying the bags that they're given at the border.
Yeah, they're like
to
these
put their belongings
big
in.
white trash bags.
Yeah,
right?
she saw all the bags and was like, wait, she asked the gate agent, are these migrants? And the gate agent was very, very hostile. And in this particular situation, I believe it was her that was saying this. He and another individual like followed her around the airport, like keeping tabs on her or something like that, as if they were in on it or supportive of it or whatever, but did not like the fact that she was asking any questions about it at all. So very, very suspicious.
And could you imagine if you are in Denver and you're just a taxpaying individual in Denver and you're being shipped people who are probably going to go onto your public welfare systems who aren't from this country and just came here and are now just going to be given that position without any saying whatsoever. Now, I'm pro-immigration, but I'm very much understanding of the person who's saying, like, this isn't an immigration process where this person's coming here and is able to work because they're not legal. So what position are they in? Am I just on the hook to now pay for their living? And how unfair that is fundamentally to the system. Now, the ideal of the system is one where someone can say, I have these qualifications. I'm going to work here. I'm going to live in this place. I have all these relationships worked out. Let me in. And we say, do you have a disease? Are you a criminal? No. Here you go. That's the ideal. But we're not anywhere. We're light years from that. We're in this crazy place where you can just show up and say, I'm in this situation. I seek asylum and get in through this quasi illegal legal way. And it's absolutely absurd. And the unintended side effects for people in these situations having to pay for all this to happen is a real injustice that just isn't seen.
Yeah.
Especially even in that reporting is just really undervalued.
Yeah.
There's a forgotten man element here that is unfair to those folks.
Well,
we need to do something about the border, and the Biden administration refuses to do so. That's why we need a new president and a new Congress.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
David.
Welcome my TED Talk.
Thank you for my TED Talk. You're welcome, folks.
So we're doing 2 this week. We did the big one on Epstein. We have this one that's kind of like everything else that happened this week. And, we're trying out this format. Let us know what you think.
Yep. You need to get going. You've got a jiu-jitsu tournament to get to, right?
Yes, sir.
And tell us about it.
I'm going to be cornering a bunch of my buddies who I train with all the time. I'm not competing this time because my shoulder, and I'm not quite all the way into shape yet, but yeah. So I'll just be going down, driving them down to go kick some butt.
Awesome. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys, so much for watching. For David Rand, Kyle Mack, Bennett, I'm Joe Sheehan. Appreciate you. See you in the next one.
Later.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Help us fight internet censorship by liking, commenting, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with your friends. To find us around the internet, visit linktree.com/humanreactionpod. And remember,
go team Dick Twist.
What?
I got it.
That was uncalled for.